The end of the year is getting closer. We are the last quarter of the year. We all know what is approaching right now. It's the annual appraisal interview. And of course, some of you might now say, yeah, that's going to be a good moment to get my promotion or my salary raise. And some of you might think, oh, it's going to be an interesting one. Let's see what they have to say. And some of you will sit there and think, yeah, pointless, isn't it? And that's exactly why we're talking today. I received quite a number of emails about this where people said, this annual appraisal interview thing, could you please have a talk about this? Because I think it's totally pointless. I think it's very arbitrary and I think it's holding something against me without any proof. And I suddenly have to defend myself for no reason. And that's exactly part of the problem. Of course, you cannot simply tell someone it's the annual appraisal interview. Here are my points of view. And now you have to defend yourself. Let's get into details of the annual appraisal interview. And of course, when you now say, okay, the annual appraisal interview happens every year, I have to endure this. This is not how it should be. And when you as a leader say, yeah, I just meet spontaneously, I am good with people, and I think this is all going well, that is also not an approach that you choose to talk with people in that way. You need to be prepared better than this. When you say my annual appraisal interview is just a spontaneous chat, sitting down, putting my opinion out there, and then people have to give their point of view on the matter, that is not what an annual appraisal interview should be about. When we talk about the annual appraisal interview, of course, some people might now claim, is it something like a review? Yes. And let's face one aspect. Let's say it's now October. I'm going to send you the Microsoft Outlook invite for December and say, let's meet for 1 hour or an hour and a half or how long it might be in your industry. And then, of course, we sit down in December and you now think, what are we going to talk about? Well, as the name says, annual appraisal interview, it should be an annual review. And the question is it? Because many people will now say, well, it's of course not annual when we meet in December, because when someone now says, yeah, Mr. Brabandt, do you remember this thing in February? I would say, no, I don't. Most likely I don't, because it's probably a very important detail for you. It's not an important detail for me. So how should I remember this? How can you expect me to remember this? And that's exactly part of the first problem. Of course, it's a review of the year. But when you do a review in December for January, March, etc., then people will most likely not remember every single detail, which, by the way, does not mean that you as a leader are automatically right with what you are saying. Some people always think it is a bit of a review. It's not much of a preview. And that's the next problem. Of course, besides having a review, and now we have to question, is it very, very smart to take only a choice of a once a year, one-off chat where we talk about the whole year, and the answer's already in there. It's of course not the case. And when you don't give a preview about what's coming up in the future, people will feel that this whole meeting is basically only about you. It's about your opinion. It's nothing substantiated, and also a monologue of the leading person, of the leader telling other people, that's what I think about you. And that is, of course, nothing which goes down too well. It's very important here that any appraisal interview is always a discussion. And the discussion means when you want to have the A++, and that's very difficult to achieve in this case, when you want to have the A+ appraisal interview, which you do once a year, and you most likely should do more often, we get to that in a minute, it's always a discussion where you as a leader talk roughly 20%. That's the A+ level, A++ level. 20% is you talking or asking smart questions that actually make the discussion move. And 80% is the other person talking their points of view. Maybe they have a different point of view. Maybe they have wishes, ideas, or input, and then you go on with that. The annual appraisal interview is not there for you as a leader to pour on other people what you actually wanted to tell them for the whole year. Because especially when it comes to the appraisal interview, I see that there's a wild amount of malpractice out there where people pretty much say, yeah, we have a process and we have this scheme where you have to follow the scheme because I have to put it into our CRM system or into HR system or whatever else you're running. And the process is I am talking, you are listening, but you are allowed to defend yourself. And that's not how an appraisal interview should ever go. The process always is, first, of course, you need to question, is it smart to do this annually? And let's face it, you will always, proven by science, Professor Cunning from the University of Osnabrück did research on that, is the best way to do this quarterly. When you now say that doesn't work in our industry because of it, this might actually be true. Sometimes quarterly is just not possible because you are a global corporation, you have global work, people are traveling all over the world, and also you don't have enough to talk about because it's all incomplete projects, so you really have to wait until the end of the year. And then it's perfectly fine. However, after I told you what this is about, most likely not every single business is a global one. Most likely not every single business has global projects. Most likely not every single business has incomplete project and has to wait until the end of the year. The first choice you make is always quarterly reviews. And the last one per year can be longer to do a whole annual review with the protocols you have written over in due course of the whole year, which is extremely helpful because then you really talked about everything in that year. Unfortunately, quite often they go for biannually. They go for every 6 months, twice a year, or for annually. And annually, unfortunately, is still the most prevalent, most seen one. So the question is annual really helpful? In reality, no. If it doesn't work any other way, you have to keep it with all the downsides that this might have. And many businesses, you can have shorter ones quarterly, and I guarantee you immediately you will have better results in your organization. Because the probably slight dissatisfaction which happened in February, which escalated to someone quitting in July, could have been solved. The probably tiny bit of issues you have on the project in March, which escalated in October, might have been found out. The very little and tiny conflict between two team members in January that escalated probably company-wide in November could have been found out and dealt with much earlier. And it's very important that annual is the last resort. When you are a large corporation, I worked for corporations which have 6-digit amounts of people working for them, and you need to have one process in place. Then you can still have your own little process where you say, in our team, we do it this way. Fair enough. Be sure that when you make any kind of notes or anything similar, you do it GDPR compliant. You very quickly in today's times run into issues with GDPR. You cannot just do Excel files and then put something with a name in there where anyone probably can access it on some sort of drive so anyone can suddenly read what you think about others. That's not a smart choice. It's also not GDPR compliant. Be sure that you use software or solutions where people know that this is GDPR compliant. Some leaders get around it very simply. They simply say, I don't put any names there. I just have acronyms. Someone is water bottle, someone else is sunflower, and they just use acronyms for people so you don't know who that is. However, often when you read this, due to what is in there, often people can find out who is the one you're actually talking about. So question if it should be done annually. And of course, when you now have certain opinions, I give you a one-to-one copy, an original copy of what I just recently saw in an annual appraisal interview. And the leader sat down there and said, yeah, I'm going to do it with my name now, Mr. Brabandt. I think you're less motivated than the year before, and when the person said, I actually don't see it that way, could you please tell me how you get to that conclusion? Yeah, well, that's just how I see things, right? I know that you applied for promotion, but I just don't see you there. I don't see you there. When I don't see you there, you can't get promoted because I can't see you there. I just don't see you there. You're better off working in my department. So first of all, multiple issues with that. Number one, when you say, I don't see you there, that is not reasoning. When you, for example, say, hey, look, you want to be promoted, and in my opinion, I can't promote you at the moment. I don't see you there because of 3 specific issues which really came to my mind. In February of last year, we had a massive issue with a client, and it's your job to deal with this, but what you did is you put it forward first to a colleague who isn't even qualified on the matter, and that colleague then was desperate and forwarded that to me, and I picked it up from there. Second, in May, we had a massive issue during our annual expo. We needed new products, we needed presentations, and we needed someone to actually step up. And when I asked who could step up, 2 others volunteered and you didn't do anything. And the final thing on that is, in October, which is just 2 months ago, then we had this issue internally where you had a conflict between 2 team members. You could have easily stepped up and shown that you have leadership abilities, or at least ask me about this if I am okay with you stepping up, but you didn't do anything. You were the first one retreating, sitting at your desk, only doing your work, not helping the team at all. And as a leader, you need to be different. And to get you to the point of leadership, if you want to, we can give you training or coaching or consulting or mentoring or whatever else you need here. And then you continue from there. That is reasoning, because very important is the burden of proof is always with you. Of course, some leaders now say, well, I never had to do it that way. And of course, let's face it, many leaders never learned how to do annual appraisal interviews. It is something you learn. It's not something that suddenly blows to your mind when someone gives you the title Senior Vice President of Global Operations. Of course not. But there are way too many people out there who never learned how to be leaders, and suddenly they are leaders. It is extremely important that you simply learn leadership before you do leadership. Any kind of outlook and options are always with the burden of proof on your side. You cannot simply tell people, I don't see it that way, I disagree with you. So, any disagreement in this course of discussion always ends up with me being right because, I am the leader and you're not. Then people will not do any kind of appraisal interview with you anymore in the future. So when you now say, how do I develop my people towards being able to deliver great annual appraisal interviews? First, of course, is people need to know it is not a formality. You probably know these kind of appraisal interviews which you have annually where people sit down with you and say, yeah, it's going well, isn't it? How are you, mate? Yeah, it's all good. Cool. Same with me. I just tick the box here, right? If you have anything, my door's always open. Cool. Thank you. See you next week. And that is something I've seen way too often happening. When you think that it is a formality where people can simply put out their nonsense on you or simply tick the box and move on, you shouldn't be surprised if they consider your organization an arbitrary one. What I told you before, the case of I don't see you there, is a real one. I sat there in due course of coaching, and a leader said, I don't see you there. And the consequence of that was that the person simply left the organization. Then HR stepped in because they said, please don't leave the organization. We really appreciate your work. Then the person said, I don't see myself being appreciated here. A negotiation followed. The whole notice was taken back. The person was promoted, however, in a different team because they said, yeah, we can't promote you in that team because that leader says they don't see you there. So they again backed the leader that didn't deliver on the promise of burden of proof is with them. That's a solution where at least the result was satisfying, but the process was not, because now anyone knows the way how to get promoted is you actually have to file your notice and then basically blackmail someone into promoting you. That is not how anything should be. Annual appraisal interviews are not a formality. They are an important aspect of actual leadership work, and they are also not an optionality. Just ticking the box is a massive offense towards the work of your people in your team. It is not something you do within 15 minutes. It needs intense preparation with every single member of your team, and it also needs intense preparation afterwards, including documentation and whatnot, because people rely on having fair chances, and especially in today's world, they have a right to get reasoning if something is denied towards them. And when you, for example, say, this is reason A, reason B, reason C, and by the way, reason D is our business model is challenged at the moment, and I don't even know what the regulation the government is putting out there, how our business model exists in 6 months' time, then of course people will understand that you can't pour out money and promotions there. But you need to give the reasoning behind it. It's always your job as a leader to do that. In reality, it means people need to get professional training and coaching, and I can't stress this often enough. The €49 online class is not going to make the cut here. People need to learn how to do it. People need to learn how to communicate, because as soon as you put everything in place the way it should be, people feel seen, people feel heard, people actually are seen, people actually are heard, and with the burden of proof with you, you're way better with preparation, you're way better with delivery, and everything will become better in your organization from there. And I wish you all the best implementing that in your organization. And when you now say, oh God, I think I have 58 questions here, feel free to contact me. So of course, first, when you listen to me or watch me on YouTube right now, feel free to leave a like here, subscribe to my channel. Thank you very much for doing so. Feel free to comment also. And of course, feel free to leave a review. When you listen to me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, leave 5 stars here. Thank you very much for doing so. And recommend this podcast and videocast amongst colleagues, friends, anyone you know. Post it on social media. Thank you very much for doing so as well. With one aspect we only have online is YouTube, the leadership tips. We have leadership tips every single week. We have more than 100 out there already, the YouTube shorts available as they are called only on YouTube. So feel free to follow me on there as well. And of course, when you follow me on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, that's also an option. Or you go to my website, nb-networks.biz, and there you can see what I do and what services I offer. When you now say, well, I have something to chat about, but it's not public. And believe me, this episode happened because of lots of emails which I received. nb@nb-networks.com is my email address. Feel free to send me any kind of email there, and then we take it from there. any kind of aspect you want to discuss, we just discuss. If you have something very specific where you say, well, are you available for training, speaking, coaching, consulting, mentoring, project interim management? Of course I am. And then we can take it from there. Thank you very much for taking the time. Looking forward to hearing from you. And when you now say, do we have online sessions which are live? Yes, we do. We just had one a couple of days ago, which went very well. Go to expert.nb-networks.com, and then you have to put in your email address there. No worries. You only receive one email every Wednesday morning. It's 100% content, ad-free guarantee. And then you get full access to all the articles, no podcast, no paywall, full access to all podcasts. By the way, everything, all of that, more than 400 articles in English and German language are available with no payroll if you with no paywall if you go via our leadership letter. And in the leadership letter, you also find date, time, and the access link to join the live sessions. We only communicate our live sessions on the leadership letter. There is no other access than that one. And of course, feel free to follow me on social media. Connect with me on LinkedIn. The full connect, you don't have to follow. Just connect with me properly. Follow me on Instagram, follow me on Facebook, and follow me on YouTube. And of course, I'm available on Xing. If you're on the German-speaking world, you might know that platform. So I'm looking forward to seeing you on there as well. Very important now, when you send me any kind of message, I answer every single message within 24 hours. However, the most important thing is always the last thing I say here. It's apply, apply, apply what you heard in this podcast and videocast, because only when you apply what you heard, you will see the positive changes that you obviously want to see in your organization. I wish you all the best doing so. Feel free to contact me. I'm looking forward to being in touch with you, and I'm answering every single message within 24 hours or less. And at the end of this podcast, as well as the end of this videocast, there's only one thing left for me to say. Thank you very much for your time.